1890 Gloucester, a city where the cathedral bells carry for miles over fields, ringing out across the slow curve of the River Severn. In a tailor's house, above the hum of the sewing machine, a boy hears music in everything: the whir of the thread, the whistle of the wind through the eaves, the bell tolling from the cathedral. He is Ivor Gurney, and he already walks with the river in his mind. He roams the meadows barefoot in summer, gathering flowers, pockets stuffed with feathers, leaves and scraps of rhyme. Even at school, he scribbles verses when he should be doing sums. The chorister ship at Gloucester Cathedral is his doorway, a gift for the bright working-class boy. Free schooling, fine music, and a place inside the oldest stones of the city. In the echoing nave, candlelight trembles on carved pillars as he sings. The music soars up into the vaults, lingers there, and teaches him something he will never forget: how sound can rise, float and linger, how a note can hold its breath and still be alive. (1911) The train from Gloucester to London. The boy becomes a man and wins a scholarship to the Royal College of Music. Charles Villiers Stanford is his teacher, stern, brilliant, but often frustrated by Gurney's wandering mind. Even in the city, his heart is back in Gloucestershire. On Hampstead Heath, he seeks the wide skies, the green slopes, the familiar calm of home. He writes songs that carry two worlds at once, the pastoral and the modern melody in one key, harmony in another. Like two rivers flowing side by side without merging, his experimentation with key, chords and harmony begin here in earnest. Some of his extended chords are so unique in style it's almost jazz-like. In 1913 he writes Sleep, a masterpiece disguised as a lullaby. The vocal line flows in long, unbroken arches. The harmonies shift like the drifting edge of a dream. It is subtle, yet quietly daring. I know those lines, I've sung them, felt them draw breath from deep within my ribs and release into the air. I too am a tenor vocal range singer, drawn to the shimmer of two tonal worlds, the blending of keys and colours. I first met Gurney here in Sleep. Late one night, a documentary on the television. I was barely out of my teens and the song stopped me cold. From that moment his voice became part of mine. I was spellbound by its grace and its difficulty. How could it sound so effortless, yet demand so much? February 1915, Gurney enlists in the Gloucestershire Regiment, a private, not an officer, shoulder to shoulder with farmers, clerks and miners. By 1916 he is in France, knee-deep in mud, hearing the endless roar of the guns. At the Somme, he sees slaughter on a scale that the world had never known. In 1917 he is wounded and gassed at Passchendaele, the poison searing his lungs and leaving a shadow on his health that never lifts. And yet even here beauty persists. He composes in his head under shellfire, scribbling scraps of melody on the backs of letters. poems on damp army notepaper. In Severn and Somme, published while he still serves, the two rivers meet the green meadows of home and the brown, choked channels of the battlefield. One flows of light, the other with shadow, and both are part of him. This was not escape, this was defiance. Against the ruin and the noise, he made something gentle, lasting. I understand that choice. I too write that way, standing in two rivers, one in the present and one in memory. For both of us, creativity is a resistance, a refusal to surrender to the dark. If England, her spirit lives anywhere, it is by Severn, by hawthorns and grand willows. Earth heaves up twice 100 feet in the air, and ruddy clay falls, scooped out to the weedy shallows. There in the breaks of May spring has her chambers, robing rooms of hawthorn, cowslip, cuckoo flower. Wonder complete changes for each square joy's hour. Past thought, miracles are there and beyond numbers. If for the drab atmospheres and managed lighting in London town, Oriana's playwrights had Wainlowed her theatre, and then coppice-clad, hill for her ground of sauntering and idle waiting, why then, I think, our chiefest glory of pride would nothing of its needing be denied, and her son's praise from England's mouth again would be outcried. "1919, home. The war is over, and for a moment the music pours out of him like a river in flood. More than 90 songs in just a few short years. Poems gathered like ripe fruit before the frost. There is a joy in the work, but also urgency, as though he knows the window will not stay open for long. There is Anne Drummond, a Scottish nurse he met in 1917 while recovering from wounds. In his letters she is the dear girl, warm, steady and kind. The tenderness between them is real, but distance, illness and the scars of war will pull them apart. She becomes both a memory and a muse. In these years the countryside returns to him. Long walks through orchards heavy with apples, the smell of earth after rain, the quiet power of an organ chord echoing in a village church. But even in the light the shadow lingers. Sleepless nights, sudden bursts of elation, followed by plunges into despair. The harvest is sweet, but it is brief. stand between. The meadow's breath is in my chest. I walk in fields I've never seen, yet know them still and call them blessed. "1922, the break comes. Delusions, sleeplessness, wandering the streets, convinced that people are trying to poison him. Friends step in, and he is committed to Barnwood House in Gloucester. Not long after that, he is moved to the City of London Mental Hospital at Dartford, a place he will never leave. The world shrinks to hospital corridors and barred windows, but inside him, the Severn still runs, gentle and free. He writes on scraps of brown paper when nothing else is to hand. His handwriting, looping and hurried, he describes imagined walks through fields he will never see again. Some poems are written with such clarity, you could believe he was standing there in the open air, looking out over the hills. Even in confinement, he is still making something new. The walls are high, but the mind goes there at will. Songs, sonnets, fragments, all flowing from a man who could not be stilled. Back then, that condition was known as shell shock, but nowadays we call it PTSD. By the mid-1930s, the papers speak of rising tensions, marches, speeches, borders tested. The threat of another war grows in Europe. For a man who had given so much to the First War, the thought of a second must have felt like a wound tearing open again, though by this point his mind was clouded, his days more inward. Perhaps he heard the headlines read aloud on the ward. Perhaps he caught snatches of conversation. To have seen the horror once, to have made beauty against it, only to find the lesson unlearned. There is a bitterness in that knowledge. At least that is my take on it. The thought of the world slipping back into that darkness would have unsettled the man who carried two rivers in his heart. 26 December 1937, Boxing Day. Tuberculosis claims him, aged 47. He is buried at Twigworth, within reach of the Severn's tide. Herbert Howells would say his art was of England as the sky is of air, inseparable. And in the end, the river still runs, the bells still ring, the boy who loved their sound is home. The Severn carries on long after one life has stopped. Gurney was a prolific writer in his lifetime, yet his genius was not fully recognized until many decades later. Only when his songs and his poems began to be formed again did the world start to hear what had always been there, the voice of a man who refused to let beauty be silenced. This is the song I first heard in the quiet of a late-night documentary. The long arches, the two musical keys drifting past each other, the final word settling like a feather. In it I hear the Severn, the bells, the meadows. I hear a man who bravely chose beauty over despair, who fought in both a physical and a mental war, and still wrote of peace and stillness. And across a century I sing with him. Come sleep, and in thy sweet deceiving me in delight a while. Let some pleasing dreams beguile all my fancies, that from thence I may feel an influence. All of my powers of care be a shadow, but a sliding. Let me know some little joy. We that suffer long annoy are contented with the thoughts through an idle fancy wrought. Oh, let my joys have some abiding. Oh, let my joys have some abiding. I think Ivor Gurney is one of those rare figures whose life and work are inseparable, and that's both his beauty and tragedy. He's not just a war poet or a composer, but a soul who tried to hold on to the light of home while standing in the deepest shadows. His love for the Cotswolds and the Severn wasn't nostalgic window dressing, it was his lifeline, the thread he kept following back towards sanity and peace. What moves me most is that he didn't just write in spite of the war, the breakdowns and the confinement. He wrote because of them. Creativity was his rebellion, his way of saying, you can take my freedom, you can take my safety, but you can't take my voice.